In my comments today, I will discuss three questions. First, why did the socioeconomic system of the Soviet Union, which I call state socialism, meet its end, giving rise to a transition to capitalism? Second, why did the Soviet state itself disintegrate into 15 separate states? Third, what are the lessons for the future of socialism? The key features of the state socialist system of the Soviet Union were first, public ownership of almost all enterprises. Second, a highly centralized form of planned economy. Third, the concentration of political power in a small group of high-level Communist Party and state officials. And fourth, a repressive state that denied the right of free expression. The basic character and institutions of the system were quite stable until 1985. However, in a few short years, 1989 to 91, the state socialist system met its sudden end and a rapid transition to capitalism began. Many factors contributed to the remarkable dismantling of the state socialist system of the Soviet Union. However, the central role was played by a contradiction in the Soviet system, present since its earliest days. That was the contradiction between a socialist economic system designed to provide benefits for working people on the one hand, and the concentration of political and economic power in a small, self-perpetuating elite of high-level Communist Party and state officials. Unless that contradiction could be overcome, it was bound to eventually undermine state socialism. Marx and Engels portrayed the coming transition to socialism or communism as the beginning of a new era of non-class society. The socialist revolution would end exploitation and eliminate propertied classes. Thereafter, everyone would contribute through some kind of labor, and all would share the results of society's labor. However, Marx and Engels, as well as Lenin, were over-optimistic about the simplicity of running an economy and maintaining public order in a post-revolutionary society. The state could not just wither away. A state is needed to organize and oversee economic planning, to carry out key economic and social functions, and to maintain public order. For the new socialist system to take a stable form, just as in earlier modes of production, state power would have to be held by the beneficiaries of the system, namely working people. However, it is not a simple matter to construct a state that empowers working people. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union claimed to rule in the name of the working class. As power was gradually centralized in a small group of top officials over the course of the 1920s, the initial top leaders were indeed dedicated to building a new system that would serve working people. However, the active initiative and participation by working people in events that had characterized the revolution, exemplified by the key role of the Soviets, soon disappeared. The top leadership of the CPSU was left as a small, self-perpetuating group, acting without any formal channel for working people to participate in political decision-making. Over time, the original leaders of the revolution passed away and were replaced by individuals who rose through the ranks of the system. While some were driven by a commitment to building socialism, others rose within the system, aiming for power, prestige, and privilege that come with high-level positions in a hierarchical system. Marxism was the official ideology of the system, and all party and state officials had to voice their fidelity to serving the working class and building socialism. However, over time, the commitment to the ideals of the revolution waned among many officials. A capitalist class under capitalism has the means to ensure that top political officials do not pursue any policies that would threaten the reproduction of the system. When socialist parties have won high office in capitalist states, the power of capital has been able in various ways to limit new policies to reforms that do not threaten capitalism itself. Thus, the long-term stability of capitalism has depended on the continuing power of the class that exploits the majority. As the Soviet system evolved over time, The party-state elite found its role defined by the dominant ideology to be the devotion to serving working people. However, Soviet working people had no structural way to enforce such a role. The socialist features of the system greatly constrained the privileges of its own ruling elite, even taking account of under-the-table access to superior consumer goods. The relative consumption level of Soviet officials was modest compared to property classes in the capitalist world. The stability of Soviet state socialism depended on the impossibility of mounting any challenge to the existing system, either from below or from within the leadership. Power was highly concentrated within the party-state elite, in the General Secretary and Politburo. While much of the broader party-state elite had little or no attachment to socialism, but there was no way to act on such views. In 1991 to 95, I interviewed members of the Soviet elite. I found many, although not all, to be openly hostile to socialism. People who had been members of the Soviet elite, that is. My co-author, Fred Weir, married into the Soviet elite, and his wife's friends typically hated socialism and admired capitalism. A high-quality focus group study of a sample of the Moscow elite in June of 1991 by a US political scientist classified them by ideology. It found 12% of the members of the focus group favored democratic socialism, 10% wanted to return to the pre-perestroika system, fully 76% favored capitalism. At that time, among the Soviet population, there was little support for capitalism. Surveys showed that although there was widespread dissatisfaction with the Communist Party, a majority wanted to retain some form of socialism. Big contrast between the elite and the broad population. When Gorbachev became General Secretary in 1985, he soon initiated an increasingly thoroughgoing reform of the economic, political, and cultural institutions of the Soviet system, perestroika. The economic reform plan through 1989 called for democratization and decentralization of economic planning, introducing some market elements within the planned economy, allowing some non-capitalist forms of non-state enterprise, individual enterprises, and worker co-ops. The cultural reform, Glasnost, lifted controls on free expression by individuals and by the mass media. The political reform made rapid progress toward democratizing the state. The reform was a program for reforming socialism, not abolishing it. If it had been fully implemented, it may well have resolved the central contradiction of the Soviet system by finally empowering the beneficiaries of the system, that is, the working class broadly defined. The initial documents of perestroika argued that restructuring would finally bring out the full potential of a socialist planned economy and public property, which had been suppressed by the flaws in the previous model of socialism. However, radical restructuring of a system that had been in place for some 60 years was bound to take some time to be completed. In the transition, there was bound to be significant disorder. In order to succeed, the restructuring had to lead to an activation of the Soviet population to take up the role of running the society. That population had been depoliticized in the decades of a top-down repressive system. The rapid restructuring of all three dimensions of the system inevitably led to significant disorder, and in particular, big economic problems. There were shortages of goods in the stores and rising inflation. At the same time, the transformation of political institutions shifted power and legitimacy from the Communist Party's top leadership to new democratically elected parliaments at the Union, Republic, and city levels. Glasnost empowered people to voice their views about the direction of change in society without fear of repression. Those developments set the stage for the rise of open opposition groups to the top leadership and its program of restructuring. Three main positions about the Soviet future emerged. Some wanted to press on with the reform of socialism. Some wanted to return to the pre-perestroika system. And others wanted to abandon socialism and install capitalism in its place. Because of the continuing popularity of socialism and the hostility to capitalism among ordinary people, the advocates of a transition to capitalism did not openly state their aims. They used euphemisms such as the need for a, quote, normal economy or, quote, faster market reform. Boris Yeltsin, a high-level Communist Party official, emerged as the undisputed leader of the forces pressing for a transition to capitalism. A pro-capitalist coalition emerged in 1989 to 91, whose base of support included three main groups. First, the still small but growing capitalist class that was emerging from the underground economy and from the appearance of capitalist enterprises disguised as worker cooperatives. Second, the rapidly radicalizing big city intelligentsia, who now had free access to the mass media. And third, and most importantly, a decisive part of the party state elite. Once freed from control from above by the political and cultural reforms, most high-level officials soon decided that a restructured socialism would not be in their interest. Neither would a return to the pre-perestroika system, which had severely restricted their privileges. A transition to capitalism held out the promise that they could become the owners of the valuable assets of the Soviet system, not just the salaried managers. With that powerful base of support, Yeltsin and his allies were able to gain sufficient power to begin dismantling the key institutions of socialism in 1990 to 91 and prepare the way for a transition to capitalism. I'm running out of time, so I'll have to move quickly through the next point. Why did the Soviet state itself disintegrate? The central logic that was driving the transition to capitalism does not in itself explain that outcome. Retaining a federal state was overwhelmingly popular among the people of the Soviet Union, except in a few small republics. Everyone knew that the dismantling of the federal state would have huge economic costs given the highly integrated structure of the Soviet economy. However, this did not prevent an anti-popular outcome for the Union state any more than the unpopularity of capitalism prevented the replacement of socialism by capitalism. The pro-capitalist coalition that arose during perestroika had its main base in the Russian Republic within the USSR. Boris Yeltsin, its leader, was essentially a Russian politician. His growing political power within the Soviet Union was based on his ability to appeal to the Russian electorate. Yeltsin played on a narrow Russian nationalism, complaining that the Russian people had to subsidize the other republics that did not endear him to the Soviet Union's other national groups. As Yeltsin's power rose, a situation of dual power emerged between Yeltsin's position as elected president of the Russian Republic, while his rival Gorbachev dominated the new Soviet parliament, which had installed him as president of the USSR. Yeltsin realized that his only route to state power was to separate Russia from the Soviet Union. In early 1991, he was finally able to achieve that result without any legal justification. The construction of the USSR as a federation of ethnically defined republics was not in itself the key reason, in my view, for the disintegration of the Soviet state. Had the pro-capitalist coalition been able to win state power in the USSR as a whole, it is highly likely that the federal state transformed into a capitalist state would have survived. What are the lessons? Despite the distortions in the Soviet form of socialism, it brought significant economic and social progress. In the end, however, its distortions led to its demise. We have witnessed the close of the first round of efforts to move beyond capitalism and build a socialist system. The achievements of the Soviet experience provide a rich store of historical evidence for the possibilities of socialism. At the same time, the negative features of the Soviet experience and the process of its demise teach lessons for the next round of socialist transitions. A key lesson is that a sustainable socialism must find a way to empower the people in the new system. It must institutionalize popular power in the economy and in the state. That must occur early in the transition, before the powerful centralizing forces that arise in a system transition can enshrine the concentration of power in the hands of a small group. A socialism in which power is concentrated in the hands of a small, self-perpetuating group can bring some of the benefits of socialism for a time. However, along with failing to bring the true liberation promised by socialism, it will not be sustainable over the long run. Today, capitalism threatens the very future of human civilization. It is driving us toward disastrous global climate change, a recurrence of deadly pandemics, the threat of a new fascism, and a revival of Cold War tensions that could lead to nuclear holocaust. Socialism still holds the promise of a future of economic security for all, human development, cooperation instead of competition, and a sustainable relation to the natural environment and a peaceful world. The survival of humanity depends on learning the lessons of the first round of socialism and applying them in the next round. Thank you.